Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. If you're currently staring down the barrel of a succession law exam, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're building a clear-cut roadmap designed specifically to help you navigate, understand, and totally conquer the complex rules surrounding wills. We're going to look at the strict rules that apply to everyday people, and then dive into the fascinating exceptions carved out for folks in truly extraordinary circumstances.
Here's the roadmap we'll be tackling today. Unprivileged wills and their execution roles, witnesses and legacy quirks, the exceptions for privileged wills, a massive ultimate will comparison, the rules of revocation, and finally, how to revive a will. Let's get right into it.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Unprivileged Wills and their Execution Rules. These are the strict foundational rules governing everyday wills, right out of Section 5.63.
Listen, for an unprivileged will to hold up in court, there is literally zero room for error. You absolutely have to memorize these 3 sequential steps for your exam. Number 1, the testator has got to sign or affix their mark. If they physically can't, someone else can do it, but only right there in their presence and by their direct instruction. Number 2, placement matters. You can't just aimlessly scribble in the margins. The signature has to clearly show the intention to make that piece of paper a will. And number 3, it must be attested by 2 or more witnesses. Every single witness has to either see the testator sign or get a direct personal acknowledgement from them.
Now check out this super fascinating concept under Section 5.64 called incorporation by reference. Keep this one in your back pocket for test day. Imagine a testator writes in a properly witnessed will, "I leave all the jewels listed in my red diary to my eldest daughter." Because that red diary was explicitly referred to in the duly attested will, boom. That separate diary legally becomes part of the will itself. It's just a brilliant legal mechanism.
Moving right along to Section 2, Witnesses and Legacy Quirks. This is where case law starts complicating things, which, let's face it, is absolute gold for exam spotter questions.
So when a will goes to probate, it's not always smooth sailing, right? If someone yells undue influence, the burden of proof totally shifts. The propounder, the person trying to prove the will is valid, suddenly has to proactively prove 3 things. First, the testator actually had testamentary capacity. Second, animus testandi, meaning the true intention to make the will. And third, they have to clear up any suspicious circumstances. A perfect example is the 1976 case of Tota Ram v. Ramalai, where the propounder had to explain why the testator's own wife had zero clue the will even existed.
Now this right here is a classic trick question your professors are going to love throwing at you. Let's call Section 5.67 the witness trap. If an attesting witness, or even their spouse, gets a legacy under the will, what happens? Does the whole will just get thrown out? No way. Only the legacy given to that specific witness becomes void. The attestation itself and the rest of the will stay completely perfectly valid. But wait. Here's the incredibly nuanced exception you need to jot down. This voiding rule does not apply if a legatee under a will is only attesting a later codicil. Tricky, right?
Okay, hard pivot to Section 3, Privileged Wills, the exceptions. We're leaving those strict rules in the dust and entering the much more relaxed territory of Sections 5.65 and 5.66.
The absolute most crucial point here is knowing exactly who qualifies for these relaxed rules. I mean, extreme necessity dictates that you can't exactly hunt down 2 witnesses and a notary when you're in a muddy trench or on a sinking ship, right? So to make a privileged will, the person has to be over 18, and they must be a soldier or airman actively engaged in an expedition or actual warfare. Or they can be a mariner at sea. And yes, that includes your standard commercial mariners, not just Navy personnel.
Because these folks are dealing with literal life or death situations, the rules under Section 5.66 are incredibly forgiving. If the will is written totally in the testator's own handwriting, it doesn't even need a signature or a single witness. If it's partly written by someone else, the testator just needs to sign it. Still no witness is needed. They can even make a purely oral will just by speaking their intentions out loud in front of 2 witnesses. But, big catch here, an oral will expires after 1 month if the testator manages to stay alive and doesn't write it down. Which brings us to Section 4, the ultimate will comparison. Let's see how all this builds into the ultimate compare and contrast matrix for your study guide. Seriously, take a mental screenshot of this table right now. When the clock is ticking on test day, being able to quickly cross-reference a privileged will's creation methods against its signature and witness requirements is going to save your life. Look at the stark contrast with unprivileged wills. A document wholly written by the testator needs 0 signatures and 0 witnesses. Wild, right? Even just written instructions for someone else to prepare a will can legally count as the will itself if the soldier dies before it gets formally executed.
You can actually see how this synthesis was mapped out in the original handwritten source notes. The author took some seriously dense legal text and turned it into a clean visual matrix. This is exactly how you want to structure your studying. Making Section 5.66 visual like this is the secret sauce for attaining these highly specific exceptions without getting them tangled up with standard will rules.
So we've built the will, but how do we legally destroy it? Let's jump to Section 5, Rules of Revocation, covering Sections 5.69 and 5.70. The absolute key distinction you need to nail on the exam is automatic versus voluntary revocation. Under Section 5.69, a will is revoked completely automatically the second the testator gets married. Boom, clean slate by operation of law. On the flip side, Section 5.70 gives us voluntary revocation. This happens when you write a brand new will or when you physically destroy, burn, or tear up the original document. But pay close attention here. That physical destruction has to be done by the testator themselves or by someone else acting under their direct, immediate direction. But what if a will just vanishes? Highlight these two contrasting cases because they perfectly show how different jurisdictions handle legal presumptions. In the classic Welch v. Phillips case, English law says, hey, if the will was last seen with the testator and now it's gone, we presume the testator intentionally destroyed it. But contrast that with Anwar Hussain v. Secretary of State. Due to conditions specific to India, the court there actually allows for the presumption that the will might have just been mislaid, or maybe someone with access destroyed it without the testator's permission. It's a huge jurisdictional difference you've got to know.
All right, homestretch. Section 6, Revival of a Will. Let's decode Section 573 and figure out how to legally resurrect a revoked will.
Okay, if a will was just legally revoked, like say it was overwritten by a newer will, you can revive it in one of two ways. You can go through the whole formal process of re-executing the original document, or you can execute a brand new codicil that explicitly screams, I want to revive my old will. But let's use some common sense here. If the will was physically destroyed, like burned to literal ashes, you obviously can't revive a pile of ash. In that scenario, you have absolutely no choice but to draft a completely de novo, brand new will. Now watch out for the partial revocation trap because exam writers love this one. Let's say a testator has a will with 10 clauses. First, they revoke clauses 2, 4, and 9. Later on, they revoke the entire will. But then they change their mind again and say, actually, I want to revive the will. What happens? Well, by default, the revival only applies to the parts of the will that were valid right before the total revocation, meaning those original clauses, 2, 4, and 9, do not automatically come back to life unless the testator shows a super clear, explicit intention to revive those specific clauses too.
Let's wrap up with a classic scenario from the case of Brown v. Brown to really test where you're at. Someone writes Will A. Later, they write Will B, which effectively revokes Will A. Sometime after that, they decide Will B is garbage, so they tear it up, revoking it. Here's the million-dollar question. Does destroying Will B automatically revive Will A? No way. Revoking a revoking instrument doesn't just magically bounce you back to your first will. So if they haven't taken the formal steps to revive Will A, what happens to their estate? Yep, they're looking at dying intestate. Keep the dire consequences of that in mind as you study. You've got this roadmap now, so go crush those exams.